Hi, and welcome to Yeshiva Sheva Aver. I'm Rabbi David Katz, and this is the Ger series, Wednesday Night Live. This is Ger number 16. And questions, comments, or feedback, I can be reached at Rabbi Katz at virtualyeshiva.com. The title for the class this evening, Olam es Hager, the world of the Ger. So just as a quick introduction, many of you know, many of you don't know, whatever the ratios are, the author of Path of the Righteous Gentile, Chaim Clorfene, and I work together on Path of the Righteous Gentile Part 2, whatever it'll be called. And Chaim is unique to me because all day long, many of you know that I worked very closely with Gerim on Ger Torah. And for me, it's really second nature at this point. It's not shocking or really anything foreign to me in the Torah world, because once any topic of Torah, whether it's the Nazir, Sota, all the Talmudic tractates, let's say, of fringe elements, things that are not common in everyday Judaism, the Sota, the Nazir, all the things that come up in the oral Torah, once you get involved and immersed in these far-reaching concepts, they lose the radical feel. It becomes part of the territory. It's you come to expect and anticipate what comes next. So the Gerim, and as everyone that's following the classes and the lectures, we kind of know what's going on at this point. If you're not following along and all of a sudden you jump in, it might be a little difficult to find out what's going on. But if I mention Rachav, I imagine a lot of you probably know where I'm going to go with that, right? Rachav married Joshua. They had no sons. Their daughter married Pinchas. And Rachav was a Ger, non-convert, who gave to the world many esteemed Kohanim and prophets. And we have a lot of these little nodes. A lot. Whether it's the Shlomo Bat-Sheva node, Shlomo and his wives, Hanukkah, Purim, just all the different avenues where the Gerim are found in history. And every day as we learn together and we teach these classes, we just kind of cook the cholent, pardon the expression, Joe. It's not exactly an Italian cuisine. But when everything gets put together, we gain a deeper and deeper and more fermented perspective of the Ger world. That's why I want to call this class the world of the Ger. Because Chaim is really the most intimate Jewish friend I have, colleague, working together on these issues. And as everybody is well aware, that you really must be in this world, probably easier if you are a Ger. And Jews are also Gerim, let's not forget that. So when you're immersed in the Ger world, you allow yourself, whether you're not Jew or a Jew, to allow yourself to be immersed in the world of the Ger, you're on topic. Everything's on the front burner. So for Chaim and me to get together, the fantastic element. Forget the book and forget the friendship and forget the Torah. That's all secondary. What's really what I think, if I can say, what gives God nachas, what gives the effect of above, is watching another human being come on to the world of the Ger, watch their eyes open, and watch the soul stop wanting to guard against taunting the Ger. Hey pal, why don't you just convert already? Why don't you be a real Jew? And you start to see the evolution of another human being love another human being. You're watching the metamorphosis of a man coming to love the Ger. And there really is, in my short time span in this world, 35 years, I think that I've never seen something happier in my life than the 75 some whatever year old man, pardon me if I don't know his exact age, who invented Noahidism for all intents and purposes. Path of the Righteous Gentile was your standard flagship book. Circa what, 1985? Lubavitcher Rebbe says to the Lubavitchers, go make Noahides. Chaim is right there in Crown Heights. You have the book, and bam. Today it's a standard stock staple at every Noahide household in the world. And yet the irony is back then, pre-internet, Noahidism was so raw. Everyone was so thirsty. We'll take anything. Just get me out of where we came from. And the irony is that book was Chaim's expression also. Get me away from things that are just not true. And yet I don't think either side appreciated it or understood it at that time. And so now here we are, what was it, 1995, 30 years, that was 30 years later? Almost 30 years. And here's the guy that wrote the book, and you're seeing his eyes open to the world of the Ger. And I think that Chaim's contribution totally goes leaps and bounds beyond my own. And all I teach is what the Gerim revealed to me. My job is to listen and really encapsulate the moment that we share together. And my job is when I encapsulate that, to just blast it in Chaim's face. And his job then is a Jew, I'm watching a light to the nations before my eyes. It's like I'm seeing the prototype. Because then he comes back with revelation. He's one step removed from a Ger proper. And it's two Jews working on how to be a light to the nations. And it's just a fantastic creation. And I can only imagine when more Jews would get involved, that the Chidushim, the novelli will just grow and grow and grow. It's going to be a bombardment of light. And right now, we see great light coming into this. And it's pathetic how little we've done. Pathetic. Now the Gerim, let's say, are maxed out. The Gerim are showing all their cards. We got the Rachavs, we got the Solomons, throw in your Yosef at Tzaddik. We know it. We've been through the Torah now twice over. We basically know the Ger territory. And what the Jew is about to do is bring out just a raw dimension that Ger within the Jew is going to come out as the light to the nations when he accepts the truth and has a perspective of love the Ger. And I think I am the most ignorant in this aspect, because for me it's just obvious. There are Gerim, there's Ger Torah. There's really not much discovery going on here. When I first started this, the discovery was minimal. It was more like when a horse gives birth to a pony, whatever you call it. It hits the ground running. It's pretty natural. But a human birth, the baby is useless. You have to really do everything. So Chaim is really attacking this like a child with new light, new colors of creation. And what really got me on this one is, we've been doing a lot of work with Shem and Aver, focusing on Aver, which when I end the class today, that's where we're going to end. And if we started the discussion of our weekly preparation, usually I get the runaround, come on, you're connecting dots that aren't there. I'm sure everyone's heard the same story. You bring up the Ger Torah and you say, come on, give me that's a stretch. That's a total stretch in what you're saying. But what we have, thank God we have enough of an arsenal that, let's say, the Jews that are not as willing as Chaim, when I go to my local pizza shop, I'm friends with the owner, and the mashgiach comes in, and you say to him, did you ever think about loving the Ger? And these people freak out. They don't know. Well, of course I love converts. I love all Jews. And you say, yeah, but what about the Ger? The Ger Toshav, Ger Tzedek. Ger Tzedek is a convert. Well, most sources will, as much as he is one, the Ger proper is also a Ger. The Ger Tzedek. And you get into these discussions, and they're very hard. You're lucky to get a smile. You get angry a little bit. He gets angry at you. You get yelled at. I mean, you're rattling the world that existed, 2,000 plus years in this guy's, let's call it, muscle memory of his soul. Now, where Chaim is different is we have the luxury of working on this every day. So when I'm working with the Noahites on Skype around the world, when I'm offline, my line is still going, and then I turn over to the Jewish camp. And so just to give some perspective of what this operation is, and the whole point of why I'm giving this whole little discourse is Chaim finally, I think, tipped tonight. Really, this one was what got me, and I think this is where I submit. Is where Chaim finally realized, and when he said it, you could hear the charm of grace. He said, I don't even know if I'm going to say it right. The Ger is really a world, a proper. I'm talking in the Torah, and that's obviously the reality, but it's the world of the Ger. It's the world. And when the Jew understands I wouldn't say the predicament of the Ger, just the reality, the spiritual reality, the lack of physicality on him. He comes out of idolatry in the church, and he's with God. He's on the level of Keter in Kabbalah. He's left corporeality behind. The physicality has been shed. King David says it in Tehillim, I can't come to your Yiddishkeit. I'm a Ger. And Seichel and Chaimer are just gross material. It just doesn't go. You can't combine the subtleties of Seichel, of the highest intellect, with mundane behavior. That's why the Noahide mustn't have religion. He learns Torah a certain way, because to bog him down with needless physicality, that is worse than the church. The church, at least, he could reject, walk away and say, okay, lesson learned. But to take on a porous Yiddishkeit, that's eternal. That's an eternal wound, and we can't let that happen. When Moses came out of Egypt with the Erev Rav, what they really were Gerim. Now the thing is, Gerim might want to convert, and that's fine. Convert. And it should be for the sake of heaven and the right reasons, which I'm sure it is. But, there is a what do you call that when you have an impurity and gold refinement in these things? There's an impurity amongst the Gerim, just like every other people, every other organism of life. What do you call it, dross or something? And there has to be extracted. Moses does it beautifully. Bring them out to Sinai. Really, the Gerim should either convert the right way or stay Gerim. The impure layer, they will convert not for the sake of heaven. They will become the Erev Rav. They'll make the calf. Aaron will facilitate, and that'll be the death sentence on the Erev Rav. Once you have the Erev Rav checking out, then all conversions will be kosher, and all Gerim will be kosher, and you have all levels of community in Torah in unison. Jews, converts, Cohens, priests, Israelites, Levites, Gerim, Ger Toshavim, Ger Tzadikim. You got rid of that bond of the need to grow in holiness, not for the sake of heaven. Jews learn from it too. Jews then become Erev Rav. They want the glory of God, the honor of God, without working for God. So the Erev Rav, when Moses brought them out, that was to rectify. Now what's interesting then is that when you take on these levels of non-purity, that's the antithetical nature. That's wanting that imprisonment of a growth of physicality that's not really wholly impure. And again, every nation has this. Erev Rav existed in the times of Enoch, Hanoch. And it says that in the Rizal that Adam sinned with Erev Rav. There's always this need to put an aftergrowth on to the establishment. It says that Joseph was the concept of Yesod, foundation, and he represents the bris of Abraham, yet evil wants to, let's say, undo that. And then our job is to do the final act and make it a function. Make it an absolute reality in this world. Now, so once we understand the spiritual domain of the Ger, the predicament and dangers of the world, what Moses had in mind, where they came from, where they can potentially go. All the while, the world of the Ger is this sublime spiritual world, devoid of gross physicality, where it remains in the negative in that it doesn't even have enough physicality to charge positive. It's the level of ayin, of nothingness, where God is one. For the Ger to manifest is to go yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing. When the Ger goes and manifests something from nothing, that's the inspiration from God himself. To go through the channel of the Ger, who is nothing. Again, we're not talking points of view. We're talking on physical, spiritual level. Shem is the ultimate nothing because Shem is absolutely subservient to God. The Ger is that level of ayin, nothing. And Hashem brings revelation from the Ger into the world of Yesh, something, and it becomes unadulterated, unmitigated. Sinai was the biggest yesh to an ayin that ever happened. Jews, Gerim, became Jews. The negative became a positive. Then again, in the world to come, why is it such a big deal to say the Gerim have a place in the world to come? Again, it's not a feel-good issue. Wow, the Goyim have a nice little place. No. That's what people want to say. And then you get all the debates in the forums, and again, you're putting needless physicality and grotesque growth on a beautiful concept. Olam haba for the Ger is the acceptable level of yesh. It's the rachamim, the mercy, where you have the revelation of the Ger on an even more subtle level than Sinai. The world to come, the resurrection of the dead, Ezekiel 37, the bones that come to life, just before the wood of Joseph and Judah become one. The bones that come to life and the sinews and meat that grow on the bones are the Gerim, who are so ayin, one with God, they're just bones. The bones are nothing more than the script of Ivrit, Aver. The Torah, basically, that is on the level of Yesh, in existence, that makes up the heart of the Ger. And as the meat and sinews grow, it's the level of resurrection in the spiritual sense of which he is revealed in Yesh. Spiritual beings where the meat, the bones, the soul really are all one. On a very soft level. On that world of Bina, understanding level. Where it's soft. It's spoken of as soft. As one. Where two are really one. You see how subtle and simple the world of the Ger is. But when you unpack it, especially if you unpack it and you don't understand it, it becomes quite complex. The more the Ger is broken down, not from understanding, I'll say, well, he's a complicated fellow. He is a contradicting guy. He speaks very blatantly about things. You have a whole world of this guy. And the result is going to always be, why don't you convert or do your 7, go to heaven? Let's say if the par is 2, we assume then it's 1 if you're not a 2. Well, why don't you assume 3? How come no one ever assumes go up a level, then always downplay with that which you don't understand? In fact, the Ger is a 3 on this model. And that's what is the brilliant light that will come out with love the Ger, the Jews are the light to the nations. When you realize the merit in giving light to that spiritual world, where light is just part of the fabric of that world, it's the spirituality. Light is, by definition, very much not physical. So for another, whether or not the vernacular translates to the Ger, and this particular class, I'm really not that concerned. If it does, all the more so good. But what I'm saying is that from the Jewish point of view, finally, I have another point of view that's not mine. And that's where I think this has been going for at least the time that I'm involved, and I'm guessing for a very, very long time. Just to get a witness, another witness to say, do you see what I see? And the answer this time was yes and no. I see what you see, but I'll tell you something even greater that you don't see. I see a total world of the Ger. Now the Gerim are very much masters of telling the Jew what the Jew's world really is. And that's what makes this possible. That's how we find in the Torah all the Ger 50% ratio of Gerim Jews in the Torah. The Ger sees Gerkeit in Yiddishkeit. And you can spot it a mile away. What we're finding now, on our side, we've received your light. And now it's time for the Jew to say, let me tell you what I see in your world. Or let me tell you a little bit about the Judah that's in you. We all have both components. The Judah of the Ger world is that it is a world. And there are really two fundamental parts to that world in Torah tradition. Shem and Aver. Shem is the revealed Torah. Shem is when the Shabbos was given. Hashem rested on the seventh day. It says, Vayinafash. And he rested. Or literally, Vayinafash means, and he sold it. S-O-U-L-E-D. He sold. He put a soul in creation. Everything now becomes living prophecy, living Torah. Everything. The Torah was given over as the Torah, which is essentially the Torah of Shem from Adam all the way till Sinai revelation. And underneath that, you have a Kabbalah. You have a Kabbalah to that tradition. So there's an oral tradition. And then there's a written Kabbalah tradition, which is the Torah of Aver, who was considered a great prophet. This is really the magnitude of that Torah. This is where you get the Levirate marriage, Yivim, carrying on legacy of souls. Where does it say that a name is your prophecy? Where does it say, Kabbalistically, what is the Ger world? Which becomes the Kabbalah proper of the Zohar Arizal. The Zohar is called the Noah's Ark for that reason. Chassidut, in the form of this Kabbalah. As the Gerim are called Chassidio Mosa'olam. Their natural jive is this kind of Kabbalah. Of the Hebrew that makes their etzem. Etzem means essence, etzem means bone. It's a double entendre for a reason. It's bound up Hebrew. Of not the script we see today, but the ancient script, your personal Torah, which is why it is essential to have a name. Other than the fact that the Kabbalah of Aver is predicated on knowledge of names. That everything that has a soul in Vayinafash, Aver has the Torah secret of how that becomes dynamic and no longer static. So the Gerim are all over the world. They are a world. And they are very much intertwined with Jews. 50-50. As much as this class is called Olam Es Hager, Olam Es Hager, the world of the Ger, let's go ahead and give it a subtitle as Tzedek Tirdof. Righteousness you shall pursue. Last week in Shoftim, we understood Tzedek Tirdof. One Tzedek to the Ger. Mr. Ger, please become a Ger Tzedek. We know you're very far away. Understand you are in a Ger Toshav universe. The Shekhinah is with you. Start walking to God. No preconceived notion of religiosity. Are you going to convert? That's already taunting the Ger. Don't concern yourself where he goes. It's none of your business. He's walking with God. God is in charge. That is that level of Keser. He understands God. By nature, there's no physicality there. It's just me and God. He now is a proper Ger Tzedek. The Jew now is to become Kayin Tzedek. Or in loose terms, the Kohen represents the Baal Tshuva, the returnee to God. And as well, he is included in don't taunt the Ger. Don't ask him how frum he is. Don't ask him how he keeps Shabbos. It, frankly, is none of your business. He is returning to God. To whatever extent God wants him to carry on the mission of Judaism to be a light to the nations, of which he will become fundamentally attached to the Ger Tzedek, is again between him and God. And that really brings us into this week's Parsha of Kiseitse, of the mitzvah Yafet Toar, taking the women of the virgin women of war, and taking them to be a captive as a wife. It's a little bit grotesque, the concept, but philosophically, or we could even say from the Chassidus of the Ger, it becomes the foundation between two people, the Ger and the Jew, the Ger Tzedek, the Kohen Tzedek. If you want to back up yet another Parsha, of Parshas Rei, it's the meat that really joins the two. The Jew represents the Baal Basar, he who has meat to offer. Call it his rabbiship, his belief, his view of Torah. The Ger conversion is always predicated on eating non-kosher meat versus eating kosher meat. Thus, in an ultimate, let's say, death model, right? Death is where you focus on sin. When you get so obsessed with sin, the Zohar says, that's when the angel of death takes your soul. It's like you have that half a second of just utter collapse of sin. You tipped over, your mission on this world is over, and you go out that way. So too with meat. Meat becomes the obsession. This is why the Jews obsessed for meat in the desert. They weren't yet Jews because they were not given meat until they came over to Israel. We know Judah is symbolized by a lion. A lion craves meat. Here, both sides crave Judah. The Ger craves to be a real Judahite, he who rejects idolatry. And the Jew craves to be a Judahite, to be a Baal Tshuva, he who rejects idolatry. So they both have this relationship of meat. I have meat. He has to realize he has meat. He can give meat versus I want meat. I need meat. Meat becomes the ultimate mashal or analogy. So a rabbi has an attractive offer. Come learn my program. The Ger would then even unbeknownst to himself ascertain what's going on here with this meat. Is this eccentric meat? Is it forbidden meat? Is it kosher meat? The vessels of meat, of everything but the meat itself, actually, becomes the judgment factor of how we guide in this world. And the rabbi has meat in his pocket as if to say, how am I presenting my meat? Am I saying I'm glad kosher? I say, come learn Torah Demet by Rabbi whoever. It's a nice way of saying, hi, I have glad kosher meat in my market. Meat just becomes the ultimate tool of association, which is why it comes down to meat in the physical realm in the relationship of the two. If you don't have that basic bridge in physicality, which is just enough physical and spiritual, the Ger can grasp onto it based on his spiritual essence. It's a level of physicality that doesn't turn off the Ger. It's not ritualistic. It's not idolatry. It's the cutting edge of mankind that really sits devoid of religion, yet it is physical and spiritual. Like the brain. The brain is highly spiritual, right? The power of intellect, yet it's just an organ. There's just another organ, yet it's the seat where we know that it's the impetus of far beyond the flesh and blood. And a parsha beyond that is lechem, bread. The bread represents the meal between two people. Abraham, Shem, Temple Mount. Forget the meat and, me and you. There's that schism. Bread is there's no schism. Bread, the entire thing is edible. So in all of these different connotations, we need to express what is the association of these two people. How do they come together over bread and meat and the women and the righteousness, the Torah? The mitzvah of Yafet Toar is when the captives come back, you can take one as a wife. And what's interesting is that a Ger woman is epitomized in the Torah as keeping herself pure. Again, it's that spiritual world where the tradition is to be a guardianship over herself, over her body, over, let's say, just the meat. The men and the women treat their bodies like a chashuv piece of meat, an important piece of meat. It's a little grotesque. But again, by Adam and Eve, in the Torah it says, you shall unite and become basar echad, one flesh. It's the non-perversion of flesh. It's understanding that our bodies are holy. That's the concept of a mikvah, resurrection of the dead. Just don't desecrate the body. And the Torah uses the word meat. And again, it's not for the context of meat itself, but how we perceive everything related with meat. Am I for sale in a shop? Am I something important? All the borrowed language involved is the language of communication that we use. Meaning, meat vernacular is the vernacular of our consciousness. And the Torah speaks in a language, and the language of the Ger is meat and bread. That's the language. The language for a Jew is I would say it's more of the language of Shem. That mother represents understanding. And the two worlds will unite. We become one language. On that day, Hashem is one, His name is one, and I will make a clear language for all of them. That's Ivrit. When all of our personal languages come out and melt and are cholent together, sorry for the cholent reference, Joe. If you want to give me an Italian dish synonymous, when they gel in this dish, then we will have one rectified Torah. As the Torah is told to us, you will have one Torah for all of you. And it's repeated many times in the Torah. And we have it. It's here. It's our oral component that we need to understand it. That's Ivri. What is a mother? What is a house? What is a woman? What is a man? What is meat? When all of the Torahs come together, we get an objective view of the universe. Because if you're off on what it is, that's sheker. Absolute truth is when we know what reality is, that Vayinafash, the souled creation of Shem, and the unique perspective of Aver. Whereas the Gerim really went after Shem, and Abraham is called Avraham Ivri. The Jews became really an Ivri mixed with Shem. It's an intertwining system. So the women have a tradition of sanctity of the physical realm. For that reason, the laws of a Kohen, of who he can marry or not marry, he may not marry a Zona, loosely translated as harlot. Now, a non-Jewish woman would be seen as a harlot. Only that's when she's not a ger. Let's call her a nachri, an akum. A ger is missing the harlotry because of the way she preserves her purity. And they learned that because Pinchas was with the Midianite women, as we learned in the end of Bamidbar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai which, by the way, Rashbi is the opposite letters as Moses' essential name, Bishagam, and Rashbi spells Basari, my meat. So again, you see that Moses and his incarnation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the Zohar is using vessels of meat, just to throw that out. The Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, because Pinchas was there, a Kohen may in fact take of a ger woman. The rabbis then dispute, yet certain times in history, we have actually had it happen. Sometimes in sanctity, and sometimes, if it was in sanctity, it was against the wishes of the institution. So now, keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the class. There's something called tohu, chaos, and these are where the confusions come from. Rachav, meat, zona, ger woman. Oh yeah, it's all the tradition of the ger. People hear random dots, they say, huh? I mean, you're really taking like random rabbinic statements and you're making a whole belief out of that? And the answer is yeah. Because they don't know the whole infrastructure behind each dot. Again, this is the revelation. There's a world under here. Way things work. A reality. It's called the world is a ger toshav. We live in a ger toshav world. In the ger toshav world, there's something called Zion that Shem founded. That's it. It's not a Nachri world. It's not an Akum world. That's that level of gross physicality. When the world becomes ger toshav, it will be that spiritual world. You want Olam Haba? You want the Olam Haba of the souls? Bring out the ger toshav. Stop prosecuting and persecuting and start redeeming. You'll get your Olam Haba. And the tikkun is realizing that these rachavs and pinchases and gerim are just points in a solid universe. Thus, the Mashiach level, the final level, is the necessity of the redemption of the ger. The redemption of the ger is the answer to all that we seek. On both sides. So again, you have the laws of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. You have Ezekiel that explains the resurrection of the dead under these terms. It's not zombieism. It's understanding that the ger spiritually comes back from his bones. And the Jew, as we say, Az Yasher Moshe, then Moshe will sing, he has his spiritual resurrection of the dead in the land of Israel. Then you have Pinchas. He marries the daughter of Joshua and Rachav. Rachav has important priests and prophets coming from her. You have the Hanukkah period, the Chashmonayim, that have claimed to have taken ger women. Then you have in both Babylons, after the first temple, after the destruction of the second temple, the communities in Babylon. And this is where this is really important. The communities of Babylon were filled with gerim in a yeshivish element called Masa Mechsia. That's where everything went down. That's where you have the system of just convert. I'm not really taunting you, but you are. As long as you're not loving, you're probably taunting. Just don't punish me too bad. You have a lot of ger Jewish interaction. On the intimate level, on the Torah level, to the point that the Talmud is redacted in the very halls of academia of the gerim in Masa Mechsia. The interactions become frequent that today we have halachically very few, if any, priests. We don't take away the right of priesthood for the sake of peace in the congregation, but we declare there are priests. But every opinion will say only until Elijah the prophet comes, as predicted by the prophet Malachi, will we know which tribe is which Cohen is which Levite is which. There's enough Kohanim intertwined with the Gerim that the rabbinic establishment doesn't know what is a Ger because of its lack of physicality. What does he become? The offspring. What is he? So they said, just don't do it. Just like today, why can't the Ger Toshav be? We don't want bad converts, this and that. We're not to par, the task. It's not in our best interest. We have other issues, i.e., just don't do it. But amongst this whole problem, which the Vilna Gaon says the last 2,000 years, which is 2,000 years of Mashiach, which follows 2,000 years of Torah, which is 2,000 years of Tohu, chaos. You have a relationship happening. The Gerim and the Kohanim. Elisha and Naaman. You don't have any more king, prophet, and judge. All you have is these Kohanim claiming to be Kohanim. Rabbis saying, yes, he is, no, he isn't. But to the Ger says, bring me the man of God. If all I have is a priest, let it be so. And just for context, I happen to be a Kohen. And the attendees to my classes are Gerim. I'm not saying it's an absolute rule, but we see that there's a precedent. And the precedent goes back of the Ger Tzedek really needs to shine in light of the Kohen Tzedek. The Kohen Tzedek reveals the Ger Tzedek. The Ger Tzedek reveals the Kohen Tzedek, focusing on Tzedek. Call it an affinity for one another, on the common usage of Tzedek. Now, why does the relationship happen? That the Erev Rav are known to be latent with livestock. Livestock makes the Beis Hamikdash run. Kohanim run the Beis Hamikdash. So you're going to have interaction with Erev Rav and the Kohen. Gerim are going to be around. It says that the place of Ruth and Boaz, Ruth actually was standing in the field, which was the Temple Mount. That there's a draw to the place of the temple. There's a draw to Zion. Once you have that association, we understood the context of Moses with the Erev Rav, the golden calf, conversion or going up, not for the sake of heaven. You then start to get a relationship through the 2,000 years of history of the Ger and the Kohen. The Ger Tzedek and the Baal Tshuva, or Ger Tzedek, or Kohen Tzedek. You start to get the relationship of what do we have in common is that the Kohen is generally going to be a Baal Tshuva. Don't marry her, don't do this, you lost the Yichus. The Kohanim become Baalei Tshuva. Now you have a mitzvah of the Torah, don't taunt the Ger, don't taunt the Baal Tshuva. So they're able to unite in their own common plight. Again, in Masa Mixia is the place of redaction of the Talmud, where effectively 2,000 years of Torah being written down in the time period of Mashiach will culminate after the destruction of the temples, and we're going to go off in our directions. The 10 lost tribes are established. The Gerim are established. Ashkenazis are already established. And the rabbinic enactment of don't keep Shabbos is fully operative. Gerim should just convert. We've already lost the royalty. We've lost the priesthood. Blaming goes out. We don't know the law, so we blame. Not giving charity is bad. Money has to go around in the world. It's not a good time. But there was peace because the Gerim and the Jews did get along in Babylon. So Ravina and Ravashi, the redactors of the Talmud, they were able to redact. But there were some drawbacks. Shabbos is taken away. Christianity is on the loose. Jews have to survive. Gerim have to survive. Therefore, they didn't convert. They kept their guns strong. Jews went their way. And we've had a back-to-back relationship ever since. This goes back to King David, who understood that there is a map of the non-Jew, the Ger, the Jew. And if you strengthen the map, like anti-venom to clear venom, Nachash getting rid of, clearing the way for Mashiach. If you strengthen rabbinic command beyond its due, then you'll get a preservation of peoples and not the eradication of peoples. The first to take the hit was Shabbos. One day, King David says that the nature will change. Shabbos will be kept universally. The prophet says it. It's a known fact. Today, it's just simply not done. Call it the temple went in Gullus, exile. The Cohen's in exile. The priesthood's in exile. You can even say Shabbos is in exile, because we don't have the universal Shabbos, and the Ger is in exile. And what brings them back, the priest, the prophet, the king, the judge, the Shabbos, the Ger, is the Ger. The prophet Jeremiah explains in the redemption of the Ger, in chapter 31, you will return the Shvus of the Ole Yaakov, the tents of Jacob, which are the academies of Shem, the institutions of the Ger. The Shvus will be returned, meaning the rabbinic status of the Ger Toshav is destined to return. Shabbos will return. The temple will return. The Jubilee will return. And all during these years of germination, fertilization of our peoples, of which the prophet also says, yes, Israel, I am a God to you and you are a people to me. And by the Gerim also he says, when I call you, I want you to come to me. The Gerim are going to be called. Over the years they had been called. The preservation of the Jewish Torah was from these interactions. There have been righteous Gerim all through time, low in number. There's going to be a time when many are called. Many Naamans will wake up. Many Jews will realize that God is their God and they are a people to God. The other gods will go the way with the wind. In the meantime, there's been an intermingling of people in the most explicit time possible, Babylon. But like the Vilna Gaon says, these last 2,000 years have been mazal. Real mazal. You've had the same friendships for 2,000 years. Every time you're born, you forget. So the Cohen Ger, there are circles that keep repeating over and over. Whether you associate with Ishmael, Esav, Yaakov, the Ger, Erev, even Amalek. The stories just keep turning over until we get to the generation that has Mashiach in it. What you have then are families that are much smaller in mazel than we think. The world is not so random. You think that you go across the globe to meet your wife. You don't, even though you do. We have an innate knowledge of where our people are. The Gerim and the Kohanim have their intertwined mazel. Let's call it the Pinchas factor. As long as the Gerim are guarding their purity, and the Kohanim are not willing to, let's say, go out with a divorcee and ruin the lineage. But if the question is solely based on a zona, a harlot, and she's not a harlot, she's just not Jewish, and she happens to be not a harlot at all, only we say don't do it. But yet there are those that become a Baal Tshuva. There are those that lose their religiosity. There are Gerim that went to the church. There are Jews that went to the church. Jews that went to other gods. Whatever you have. People stop believing. God brings them back. When I call you, come to me. We get back on track. Maybe you lost your status as a Kohen by law and you didn't even know it. That's why the rabbis can't take it away. We just kind of say, for peace of the matters, okay, don't bother the guy, unless he knows explicitly. If he knows explicitly, it's over. That's desecration of the seed, it's done. But if it's not explicit, there's wiggle room. That they're prepared to semi-deal with. Gerim, they say, don't get involved. But only Gerim start becoming Ger Tzedek. Maybe in some cultures they look like Jews, act like Jews, maybe even think they're Jews. There's a lot of shades of gray. And when those shades of gray have the right tint, seed is delivered, babies are born. Joshua, Rachav, Pinchas is a perfect model for this map. In the time of the end of days, we expect there to be no priests around, or very few in number. But if you take into account the greatness of the spirituality of the Ger's world, and what he's guarding, and the secrets he contains, and the mystical matters of the priesthood going back to Shem, as Pinchas received from Shem, when Elijah the prophet comes, you may find a lot of priests in this world. They'll finally have the answer to the age-old question, what is the status of the Ger? Whatever it's worth, those unions did happen. The kahuna was basically lost, says the Talmud. The Chashmonayim were pointed out of office over these issues. The Torah was changed forever by influence of Gerim, even by the merging of the worlds, the Jewish world and the Ger world and Masa Mexia. The two peoples are intertwined, and in particular the Ger Tzedek and the Kohen Tzedek are even more intertwined. It goes back to the beginning. If the 7 laws of Noah would be seen as a positive instead of more of a negative in judgment, but as a revelation of rachamim and mercy, what can be done, what Torah can be learned and should be learned is to be learned. Perhaps Olam Haba would have already have come. And that's where we're knocking on the door today. 3 or 7 go to heaven. There's an awful lot of people that are looking for that Shabbos. That are looking for the enactment to change, as King David prophesied. There's a lot of not Ger Tzedek in the world. But how many more Ger Tzedek would there be if we would just teach and let it be known what a Ger Tzedek is? What the Kohen Tzedek is? What the relationship always has been? The tradition goes back to Shem and Aver in a revealed and concealed world. The world of revelation is the Torah of Shem, where really everything is one. The meat, the body, the soul, they're called creations of God, expressing the one unity of God. Aver becomes the Kabbalah, the prophetic nature of inspiration coming directly from God, yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing. That world of nothing, total harmony with God, allows there to be outbursts of revelation. But it needs like a sperm and an egg. It needs that physicality. It needs that Shem Elokim of the Jew who says Hashem hu Elokim, like Elijah, to bring it into this world, make it physical, make it a conception. For that reason, there must be one big conception called the redemption of the Ger. There must be that Sinai moment where the world gets a little bit of yesh, that merciful yesh, to bring tangibility to that Ger Toshav world. Once it's there, what's that word when you have a light, a shade of a lamp? What's the word? Translucent, whatever it is. The light of Am Yisrael, once there's a lampshade, then when the Torah comes out, that lampshade will illuminate, and you will have light in the world. The world will fill with knowledge of God. Very simply, there is a world of the Ger. It's a very soft-minded world. You have to be very soft to hear it, to feel it, to sense it. If you're going to be gruff and abrupt and angry and arrogant, you'll miss it. And you'll accuse them of being bad converts, should-be converts. That's called taunting the Ger. Just like the Jews said, Nasa v'nishma, we will do and we will listen at Sinai. Hashem is asking for one more Nasa v'nishma. If you really want to get the essence of Bina, of understanding of Mashiach, say Nasa v'nishma one more time and allow yourself to just love the world of the Ger and allow the redemption to finally happen. Thank you very much. Have a great week. See you on Shabbos. Thank you.